Hey there, I'm Cathi Barker from Software Solutions, and you're looking at one of a series of videos that go with my Microsoft Excel The Essentials Level 1 course. I now want to look at file management. We have one file open in Excel, and I can tell by looking at my title bar that it's called Book 1. Now, what I'd like to do is open up another file. So say you're working on this file and then you get interrupted and you have to create a completely separate spreadsheet. To create a new file, we could go File, New, and Blank Workbook, but we actually added this button to our Quick Access Toolbar, which allows us to quickly create a new workbook or a new document. So I'm going to click it. As soon as I click it, I see Book 2. So I've got now two files open. Book 2 is actually sitting on top of Book 1. So you haven't closed Book 1, you've just got Book 2 sitting on top of it, a new workbook. If I wanted to open up another file, I want to look at another way to open up a new document. We've looked at this method here, and we even discussed this method here, going File New. But notice when you rest on this button that it mentions the shortcut key combination Control-N. Control-N, universally across most Microsoft Office applications, is how you create a new document. So if you were in Outlook and you were sitting in your inbox and you went Control-N, you'd open up a new email. If you were sitting in Word and you press Control-N, you'd get a new Word document. And because we're sitting in Excel, if I hold the Control key and I tap N, I get Book 3. And I can see that on my title bar at the top here. So I've now got three files open named Book 1, Book 2 and Book 3. How do we jump between them? How do we multitask? Because often we want to work with two files at the same time. One way is to just rest on the Excel icon at the bottom of your screen. And when you do so, let me just get it to wake up. When you do so, a little peekaboo is what they call it. A little peek pops up. And I can literally see I've got three workbooks open in Excel. And if I rest on this one, I can view what's in Book 1. I can see the numbers sitting in sheet 6. I can view Book 2 and I can view Book 3 as I just roll across them without even clicking on them. But if I want to go to Book 1, I would just click it. And that would drop me into Book 1. If I wanted to go to Book 3, I would rest on the Excel button and I would click on Book 3. And that's taken me to Book 3. So you can multitask. You can have multiple files open in Excel, and you can use the Excel icon at the bottom of your screen on what they call the taskbar. You can use that to peek at what you've got open and switch between things. But if you're looking for an alternative way, maybe you've already been doing it this way and you're looking for something faster, one of my faves is Alt-Tab. Now you've got an Alt key, in fact you've got two of them, typically either side of the spacebar on a normal keyboard, QWERTY keyboard. So I'm going to hold the Alt down and I'm going to tap the Tab key. And as I do that, it actually allows me to rotate between the files I've got open. It's not actually showing me on this particular screen setup. So Alt-Tab is another way that you can rotate between files. But I'm just going to use the peekaboo because then you can actually see what I'm doing. So I'm going to go to Book 3. And if I want to close Book 3, there's a variety of ways that you can close a book. I think the most common way probably is just to hit the X in the top right corner. And that will literally close Book 3. Now, if you've got any changes in that file that you haven't saved, it will ask you if you want to save. But I literally did nothing in that Book 3, so it just simply closed it, no questions asked. But if it does ask you, just say don't save. Now I want to get back to Book 2, so I'm just going to rest on the Excel icon, click on Book 2. I could actually hit the X right here, and that would close it. So I might close Book 2. So now I'm left with one file open, if I rest on the Excel icon, called Book 1. And so that is how you open a new file and how you close a file. Now let's have a look at entering some data above and beyond these numbers in sheet 6. Let's go to sheet 1. So I just click on sheet 1 at the bottom of my screen. And maybe I'll go to C2. All right, and maybe I'll hold the Control key and wheel forward to zoom in, just like we discussed in the earlier video. Now, having zoomed in, I'm going to ask you to type, if you could have anything for dinner tonight and you didn't have to plan it, you didn't have to cook it, you didn't have to buy it, it just miraculously turned up in front of you, what is one of your favorite dishes? All right. Now, underneath that, if you could have anything to drink, what would go nicely with that? And under that, if you could snap your fingers and be anywhere right now having that favourite dish and that favourite drink, what is one of the favourite places you like to be? All right. So I've entered some information into book 1 and now I want to save what I've typed. You certainly don't want to leave saving until you finish. You want to save as regularly as you possibly can so that you minimize the amount of lost data. And when it comes to saving, I'm looking up at my quick access toolbar, which we customized in an earlier video, and I'm seeing I've got the options of auto save, I've got the options of save, and I've got the options of save as, because we added this button to our quick access toolbar. So what's the difference? Let me just use this as my whiteboard. What's the difference between save and save as and auto save? Well, the main difference with autosave, I would have to say, is it will always ask you. It will always ask you, what do you want to save it as? So what you want to name it. Where do you want to put it? And even what format do you want to save it in? Do you want to save it as a PDF file or do you want to save it as an Excel file? And I'm just going to double click this line between H and I to widen that column. So save as will always, let me cut that down, will always ask you what do you want to name it, where do you want to put it, and what format do you want to save it as. Whereas save won't always ask you, won't always ask. A lot of the time, let me just widen that column, double click, a lot of the time it'll just overwrite the existing file or update the existing file. So it won't always ask you. And so that's why I think when you're starting with Excel, this is probably the least safest option. This is the safest option. Because every time you hit save as, it's always going to ask you, what do you want to name it, where do you want to put it, and what format do you want to save it as? And that way you won't accidentally overwrite or update a file when you shouldn't do. Now, autosave is when you want to save to the cloud. So if you want to save it to OneDrive or SharePoint or any of these cloud options, you turn the autosave to on. So if I click the on option, it says what cloud do you want to save it to? And when you save it to a cloud, then you don't have to remember to save. It just automatically saves every time you make a change. And so that takes away that responsibility from you. It also comes with some cons as well as some pros. So when you want to save to the cloud, it will then automatically save. So that's that option. I want to focus on these two options here. Now the save button looks like a floppy disk. Microsoft really need to update that because when was the last time you saw a floppy disk? They really need to turn that into a memory stick. And the Save As button looks like a floppy disk also, but it has the added feature of a pencil because it will always ask you, what do you want to name it? Where do you want to put it? So they look slightly different, but they're both floppy disks. The save, when I rest on it, the shortcut key for save is Control S. So Control S is the shortcut key for save. So every time you press Control S, it'll automatically overwrite and update the file. But Save As, when I rest on that button, it's F12. And so I'm just going to write that here. F12 is a function key. So across the top of your keyboard are function keys, and F12, doesn't matter what program you're in, is save as. So often when I'm looking at an email and I think, oh, I need to save that email outside of Outlook as an actual file, then I'll press F12. Or if I'm in Word or any Microsoft program, if you press F12, you will bring up the save as. So either press F12 or click the button, and I want you to bring up the save as. And here it is here. And that's a lot quicker, let me just cancel, than going File, Save As, Browse to get to here. It's a lot quicker to hit the button we added to our Quick Access Toolbar, or press F12 is even faster again. So I'm going to press Save As, and I want you to save it with the name List, so that's its name. The location is Desktop, or maybe let's make it Documents. And then save as type, it's saving as an Excel workbook, but notice this is where you could save it as a PDF file. But I'm going to leave it as an Excel workbook and call it List, and actually I will put it on my desktop. And when I go save, that is the name that will appear at the top of my screen, List, because I've saved it as List. And it even tells me that it's been saved. So if that word saved doesn't appear, then I know that what I've done recently hasn't been saved. So let's add some more to this list. I'm just going to first of all double click this line between C and D to widen column C. You could drag it, make it wider, make it narrower, but it's best practice to double click it, because then Excel looks at all 1,048,536 rows and says that column needs to be that wide or that narrow in order for everything to fit nicely. Whereas you're basing your judgment, in my case, on the 17 rows I can see, which may not be correct. But anyway, in C5, if I could take anybody to that meal, who would I take? That would make an interesting lunch. So that's who I take, and I'm just going to widen the column again. And if I could spend the day doing anything, working up an appetite for that meal, what is your favorite way to waste a day? Are you into fishing? Are you into hunting? Are you into reading? I'm into movies. So what is your favorite way to waste a day? Now notice the word saved has now disappeared to the right of list. So what I've added has not been saved. And so now I need to save or update or overwrite my file called list with the changes. So I could hit the save button, or I could press Control S. And as soon as I do, it says it's saved. So you can't overdo saving. Save as regularly and as often as you possibly can, because if something goes wrong, if there's a power cut or what have you, your machine dies, the most you'll lose is between the moment that the incident happened and the last time you saved. So if you save regularly, your chances of losing a lot is lessened. Okay, so that's save and that's save as and that's autosave. So I hope that makes sense. Oops, and I've accidentally hit that button, so I'll just go back into page layout. Just be aware that there's these buttons. There's page layout, looks like that, but sort of looks like a page, piece of A4. And then there's this layout, which is page break preview. And so then there's this one, normal. So you really want to be staying in the normal view if at all possible. Now there is one other thing I need to share with you, and that is there is another type of autosave, not to be confused with this autosave. This autosave relates to the cloud and saving it to the cloud, which we talked about, if I just minus that, which we talked about here. But in addition to that cloud autosave option, there is the ability for Excel to save your work for you every 10 minutes. And the idea therefore is that if you delete a sheet, for example, say you deleted sheet 6, and then you decided you needed it back. Well, deleting a sheet is something you can't undo. And maybe a lot of time has passed since you deleted that until you realize you actually need it back. The autosave creates every 10 minutes of work a file, and as more time progresses, lots of files, and you can go back to the file 10 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, 40 minutes ago, and get that information back. I need to show you where that's coming from. If I go to File here, and I'm just going to have a look at info. No, see, there's none yet. If I go to File and Options, and I go to Save, this option here, Save Information every 10 minutes. In a later video, when some more time has passed, I will show you how you go back to those autosave files. And not enough time has passed yet for me to take you to one. But what this is basically saying is every 10 minutes, it will make a copy of your file, and you will be able to go back to that copy and retrieve stuff. If I cancel, you will see it under File and Info, and that's how I know there's no autosaves, because normally they sit here and you can retrieve them from here. And that can be helpful. Word does it as well. Other Microsoft Office applications do it as well. And the good thing also is a lot of us are familiar with the undo. So you can undo something that you did. But you're supposed to get 100 levels of undo. So you can undo, 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 and undo everything you've done. But some days you go to hit it and you don't even get one. And the reason for that is an autosave has kicked in. The 10 minutes has ticked over. It's generated a copy of that file and put it on the side, and it's reset the undos back to 0 again. So if you're wondering why you don't get 100 levels of undo and yet you've done quite a bit of stuff, it's probably because the autosave is kicked in. And if you went to File and you went to Info, you would see the autosave files here, and you'd be able to click them and open that file on top of the file you're looking at and retrieve stuff that you wanted to. I hope that makes sense. Come back for the next video. As the videos progress, I'll come back and show you those autosave files. See you soon.